you, everybody. I think our next guest is an interesting fellow. I've seen him perform 3 or 4 times in my life, once in New York, once in Las Vegas, and once in Atlantic City. He's a fine singer, has very high musical standards, and he has, of course, a very famous name. Let's have a nice welcome for Frank Sinatra, Jr. Hi.
Hello, Boggs.
Nice to see you again. Have a seat. That's it. And Frank is at the Atlantis, appearing in the afternoon shows. Is that not correct?
Right. We're reviving the old Atlantic City tradition of daytime music.
What time do you go on? 4 in the afternoon?
No, we start at 2.
2?
We start at 2, and then we have another one at 4.
You have some fans here in the audience. I said Frank Sinatra Jr. Everybody's really applauding. They're happy to see
I like
you.
that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
What kind of musicians are you working with on this gig?
My usual people, Buddy Childers, wonderful trumpet player, and my rhythm section. It's been with me for years, just the usual. It's a simple jazz show.
Well, I like jazz. You know that.
Me too.
Well, I go to bed pretty early, and I missed Nightline last night with Ted Koppel. You saw it, and I'd be curious about your reaction of what it was like seeing Gary Hart on Nightline last night. How many people saw it? Interesting show, right? What'd you think?
It gets a pretty big audience, there's no question. What did I think? I think that we are here in your studio today in September of 1987. And where are we 1 year from today? We are going to be a few weeks away from the general election. And it occurs to me, now I'm not in politics.
No, I know.
You and I have known each other a long time. I'm not in politics, I'm not running for office or anything, but it occurs to me that on both sides of the aisle, as they say in Washington, the Republican side, the Democratic side, everybody's got to sit around and say, now about 1988.
What are we going to do?
And nobody is, you'd figure by now that some names would really begin to be going, but nobody really has become this favorite kind of thing.
Well, Hart was the front runner, and he self-destructed. The question that I have, based on what I heard on KYW radio, is this. Gary Hart says, I was unfaithful to my wife. I admit that I was unfaithful to my wife, and I don't think the press should ask any candidate whether or not that candidate, he or she, is unfaithful to their spouse. Well, what do you think about that? To me, is the core of the issue.
That's not the first time. Remember, it's one of the ladies said he's probably the only one that got caught. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe, maybe not. See, these are the things we don't know. But look at it this way. Do you remember during the administration of Jimmy Carter, I think he gave an interview to Playboy magazine, and he said,
in his heart.
Right, he said, when I look at a woman who I lust for, I've committed adultery with her already in my heart and whatnot, which I'm sure probably pleased.
I did that twice already today.
Yeah. Well, it probably pleased Jerry Falwell and Jimmy Swaggart and those kind of people, that kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is, nowadays, there are all kinds of books and magazine stories that are appearing about the supposed philandering, to use the old word, quote, quote, of John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
There was a television movie that starred Robert Duvall and I believe Lee Remick some time ago, in which he played Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Right, and showed that affair with
and
the
supposedly
woman.
He was having an affair, and I believe the woman supposedly who wrote that story said she would never release that story to the public until after Mrs. Eisenhower was dead. And this, so I mean, everybody has got, as they say, some skeletons in their closet. So if suddenly former Senator Hart is involved in this, you asked me a question, what do I think of it? I think what it is this, I think the Democratic side of things is starting to panic, and they say, there's only one person we've had who anybody seems to have really liked, and that was Gary Hart, and he's declared himself out. Maybe we better go talk to him.
I think it's going to be Cuomo, personally, but we'll see what happens. I'll ask you a couple things. Now, the few times I've interviewed you, Frank, I've never asked you this. You must have had a fascinating childhood. I mean, growing up in Los Angeles with your sister, Nancy, and Tina, who were some of your friends? And when you were a little boy, 10, 11, 12 years old?
Just the kids I went to school with, like everybody else.
No, it wasn't like a case of because you were the Sinatras that you had many celebrity children as friends?
Sure, of course.
Who were some of those?
Michael Douglas, who you see in movies and Romancing the Stone and everything.
Yeah.
We used to play football together when we were kids. Remember a wonderful actor who died years ago? Remember Frank Lovejoy?
Sure.
Steve Lovejoy and I grew up together. Steve Bogart, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall's son. We were kids together. I was a little older than they were.
When you were that age?
Think of it, I was a lot older than they were.
When did you decide? I remember I remember reading in the paper one day, Frank Sinatra Jr. has appeared at Disneyland, and just kind of sprang it on people and surprised. When did you decide that you were going to choose what I think is a difficult route, which is as a young man to say you're going to sing the classic American repertoire in an era of rock and roll? It would be difficult for anybody.
We were between eras then.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, we were between eras. I started as a singer. See, I was a piano player, and I started as a singer in 1962. In 1962, the phenomenal fame of Elvis Presley was in its 6th year, and we were 2 years away from the Beatles. So there was a slight lull at that time, and I was something of a novelty. Oh, Frank Sinatra has a son. Frank Sinatra's son is going to be a singer. That was about the reaction. If you're my age, all of you around, and you were cognizant of that, you probably remember that. I was the Tiny Tim of the day. I was the Miss...
I give you credit for admitting it.
I was the Mrs. Miller. Remember Mrs. Miller? Downtown, where all that? Remember Mrs. Miller's greatest hits? I was the Mrs. Miller of the day. I was the new sideshow kind of thing that was going on. Oh, isn't that wonderful? And I remember there was a cartoon in a magazine that showed 2 white-headed women sitting in a beauty parlor. One was leaning over talking to the other one like this, and the caption underneath said, "I always thought I was too old for Frank Sinatra. Now there's a Frank Sinatra Jr." You know, this was the kind of thing that was around at that time.
You have a couple of nieces, correct? Nancy and Tina have. There's no nephews.
Nancy's children.
Nancy's children.
She has 2 little girls.
How old are they now?
They're not so little anymore. They're 12 and 13 and 11 now.
So I guess people would wonder: are Frank Sinatra's grandchildren, your nieces, showing any unique musical talent, or are they interested in music?
I don't know.
Do you see them often?
Yes, but I don't know if
you
I've
haven't
ever
seen
heard of any such likelihood.
No.
One Christmas, 3 or 4 years ago, their grandfather bought them a computer for Christmas. So being like all good uncles, I had to go and connect the darn thing, you know. I had to wire it into the television set and get the modem and everything set up. And I mean, after about an hour, I came back, and the eldest one, Angela Jennifer, who we call AJ, she had the cartridges for it. She'd taken them away. I said, "Don't you want to play Star Blasters or whatever it is, the video game?" She said, "Oh, I don't need that." And she was word processing. She was sitting there going, "No, put that sentence down." And I was looking at it. And they were word processing within an hour. And then their father, who is now deceased, and she said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Look at this." And she said, "Oh, you don't think the kids are as stupid as we were, do you?" And look at them, you know, that they were word processing. She couldn't have been much more than 8 or 9 at the time, but she took the video games and put them back in the box, and she was starting to type out things, you know.
One other
Most
thing.
kids, I think, today can do that.
I am totally illiterate on a computer. Do you have a computer?
No, I've had one. My computer gave me a Raspberry.
What does that mean? Forget it, Frank.
A raspberry. My computer gave me a raspberry one day. You know, a lot of people, you work computers here in your jobs and what, you know that the people who make the programs for computers in the past always did it for professionals, right? For companies and corporations and banks. Now, in order to stay alive, they have to make consumer programs, right? And they get fed up with it. So I had a computer, and the guy that had the built-in software, the built-in package, they had it set up that if you made 8 consecutive procedural mistakes, a certain thing would automatically be triggered in the software. And that was, the screen would blink and go blank, and I looked at it and I said, "What did I do?" And a sign came on that said, "How did a brilliant young machine like me end up with a complete imbecile like you?" Question mark. And I said, "Oh, that's fun." Then I made the 9th one and it said, "Wrong again, stupid."
No more
so
computer.
I called the company in Boulder, Colorado that made it, and I said, "About the software." And the guy said, "Hold on a minute," and he yelled. He said, "One more for the toilet." And I heard this hysterical laughter in the back of the guys that made the programming.
Put that in.
Right, and it gives you a raspberry if you screw up too many times.
Frank, we're out of time here. We got a kids' fashion show coming up. I want to remind folks you're at the
Atlantis. Oh, yeah, wait till they see it.
We got a lot of fashions back there. The Atlantis Casino now through the 18th of September. Always good to see you. Stay well.
Good luck with the new show.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Where do you see the little ones?